Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
Questioner asks, I want to take my inquiry to the next level. I can meditate or do inquiry with my eyes closed. It takes me to a silent place. But Ramana Maharishi said I should do it during all the waking hours. I want to do inquiry all the time too. But how to do it when I am working, walking, talking, listening? Is it the same as present mindful awareness? That is, how can I stay in the self while working, which requires thinking, listening, and talking? They all want me to identify with certain respective phenomena. How can I constantly be in the self in those times? Or should I come back to the self now and then once I finish involving with those phenomena? For example, when someone is talking to you, will you notice what is being said or will you notice who is listening? When you are talking, will you notice what are the things needs to be said or will you notice who's doing the talking?
Right. The practice of self-investigation is extremely simple. In one place, Bhagavan describes it as Swarupa Smarana, self-remembrance. That is, whatever we may be doing, we are always aware of our own being. We're always aware, I am. But because of the interest we have in things other than ourselves, we generally overlook this fundamental awareness, I am, because we're more interested in attending to other things. But even when we are not attending to our being is always shining. We're always aware, I am. Whatever we may be doing or not doing, it is possible to hold on to at least a tenuous current of self-remembrance. That is, we can, whatever else we may be doing, in the background, we can be holding on to self-attentiveness. Of course, this requires practice. It requires, and it requires practice and it requires great love to do so, great dedication to the practice. That love and dedication comes with practice. The more we try to hold on to self-attentiveness, the more it becomes possible to hold on to self-attentiveness, at least to a certain extent, whatever we may be doing. But regarding the question, is it the same as present or mindful awareness? It depends what is meant by present mindful awareness. Generally, what is the type of meditation that is described as mindfulness. Mindfulness just means attentiveness, but what generally goes by the name mindfulness, it particularly associates with the the practice of Buddhist vipassana meditation, which is basically being attentive to whatever is happening, whether externally, whatever bodily actions we may be doing, whether we're eating or walking or talking or whatever, or whatever is happening internally in terms of thoughts, feelings, emotions. Just being attentive to all these things. That is what is generally referred to as mindfulness meditation. This is all being mindful of things other than ourselves. So this is fundamentally different to self-investigation. Even when it is emphasized that we should try to be mindful of the present moment, what that means depends on our understanding. Generally, when people are asked to be attentive to the present moment, they try to attend to whatever is happening in the present moment. Whatever is, whether externally or internally, but whatever is happening, is happening in the flow of time. So it is not the precise present moment. The precise present moment is an infinitesimal duration of time. In fact, it has no duration at all. It is the interface between the past and the future. That is, if we take any moment, one moment before is past, one moment ahead is future. So if we try to be in the precise present moment, that precise present moment has no duration at all. So what exists and shines in the present moment is not anything happening, is not any action or any doing or any happening. It is just being. What is it that makes the present moment present? Why do we feel that this present moment is now? It is because of the presence of ourself. This applies to both time and to place. The place where we are present now, in other words, the place where our body is, we feel that to be the present place here. And the moment in time that we feel to be now, the present moment, is the moment where we are experiencing ourselves. So what makes the present moment or the present place present is the presence of ourself. So to really be in the present moment, we need to attend not to anything that is happening, but only to ourself, the one in whose view all these things are happening. In other words, to be really in the present moment, we need to turn away from all things that are happening, because what is happening not in the precise present moment, but in the flow of time. Without the flow of time, nothing can happen. So, but the precise present moment has no duration. There's no flow in the precise present moment. There is only being, our own being. So the being truly mindful to the present moment means being self-attentive, if we understand it correctly. That doesn't mean that what people generally take to be mindfulness to the present moment is self-attentiveness. Only self-attentiveness is truly being mindful to the present moment. But that is when we are going very deep into our own being. Then only we can really be said to be investigating the present moment. During the midst of other activities, we are not expected to go very deep into self-attentiveness, but just to hold on to at least a certain degree of self-attentiveness. So we just shouldn't forget our own being, or we should try to avoid forgetting our own being. In other words, we should try to hold on to the self-remembrance, merely remembering our being. This is possible to do whatever else we may be doing, whatever else we may be attending to, because the way attention works, actually, if we go into it very deeply, at any one moment, we are attending to only one thing. But the speed at which the mind works, our attention is constantly moving from one thing to another thing. So just as a series of film frames, when projected on a screen, seems to be a moving picture, whereas actually what it is just a series of still pictures that are projected on the screen. Because of the speed with which it's happening, it seems to be a moving picture. In exactly the same way, we seem to be able to attend to more than one thing at a time because of the speed at which our attention is going from one thing to another thing. So often we may be doing certain activities, and in the background we'll be thinking other thoughts. This happens to all of us. Supposing we're going for a walk, or we're driving a car, or whatever it may be, or riding a bicycle, or whatever it may be, our attention isn't wholly on what we're doing. Other thoughts will be going on in the background of our mind. This will be the case even if we're doing some office work that requires a lot of mental concentration. Other thoughts will also be there in the back of the mind, at least to some extent. At least they'll be coming and going, other thoughts, in the midst of whatever we're doing. So since we expend a lot of our attention on attending to things that are not immediately necessary, because this is the nature of the mind. The mind is always, as Bhagavan says, uruvitu urupatram, leaving form it grasps form. So the mind is constantly grasping one thing after another thing, after another thing, after another thing. And in the midst of all this activity, it's primarily focused on whatever is the task at hand, particularly if it's a task that requires attention. But rather than wasting our attention on things that are not immediately necessary, we can devote at least some of our attention to our own being in the midst of activities. How this is possible will become clear only with practice. If anyone who is trying this finds it difficult, we shouldn't worry about that. We should just continue trying to be self-attentive as much as possible. The more we are self-attentive, the more we will find that it is possible to hold on to self-attentiveness even in the midst of other activities. It doesn't, in fact, if we're holding on to a certain degree of self-attentiveness while engaged in other activities, we will probably be doing those other activities better because our attention won't be dissipated on many other unnecessary thoughts. So the mind will be calmer and will be doing whatever task it has to do more efficiently. So there is no, of course, when we are not engaged in any other activity, we're able to focus our attention on ourselves more deeply. We're able to go deeper into being self-attentive. That we should try to do whenever possible, but that's not always possible because there are other things that demand at least some attention. But we should, at any given moment, we should try to be as self-attentive as possible. That's all that is required. And of course, because most of us lack such passionate love to know what we actually are, our attention is constantly getting pulled away by our Vishaya vasanas, pulled away to attend to things other than ourselves. So it's only with a great deal of practice that we can come close to holding on to self-attentiveness uninterruptedly. But we can, when we begin a journey, we can only begin from wherever we are at present. So if we haven't had prolonged practice of self-attentiveness, at first we're going to falter a lot. We're going to attend to ourselves for a few moments and then our attention will get pulled away. And after some time we'll notice we've forgotten about being self-attentive and we'll pull it back again. That's okay. We just have to continue. We just have to try as much as we can to hold on to self-attentiveness. If we feel that we are not succeeding, we shouldn't be dejected about that. What Bhagavan has asked is that we should try to be self-attentive as much as possible. So long as we're trying, even if we feel we're not being very successful, the very fact that we're trying is itself a clear sign that we are making progress. So we shouldn't have unrealistic expectations of ourselves. We should all that is required is that we try to be self-attentive as much as possible. As much as possible means for as much duration, I mean, for as much time as possible, and also as deeply as possible. So we may not be going very deeply into self-attentiveness, but at least a certain degree of self-attentiveness is better than no self-attentiveness at all. So we need to try to be self-attentive for as much time and with as much intensity as we're able to be. We shouldn't be dejected if we feel that we're not doing it so well. It doesn't matter if we keep on trying slowly, we will gain as Bhagavan says in the 6th paragraph of Nana, after saying that whenever our attention gets distracted away towards other things, that is, whenever any thoughts appear, that means thoughts appear only when our attention goes towards them. So when our attention goes towards anything else, we need to turn our attention back towards ourselves, the one to whom the thought has appeared. And Bhagavan says, by practicing and practicing in this manner, for the mind, the strength to remain in its birthplace will increase. That words he says in Tamil are, Ipadi paraka paraka manataku tan pirapidital tangi nikkam shakti adikari kindrudu. By practicing and practicing in this manner, for the mind, the power, the strength to remain in its birthplace, that's in its source, in its own being, will increase. So what is important is that we try to practice as much as we can. That means not just when we're sitting for meditation, but even whatever else we're engaged in, whatever other activities, bodily or mental or vocal activities we may be engaged in. Who is engaged in it? Who is talking? I am talking. Who is listening? I am listening. Who is writing? I am writing. Who is thinking? I am thinking. So we need to, whatever activities may be going on, we try to hold on to that I that is experiencing itself as I am doing all these things. It is possible, but it requires patient and persistent practice. I hope that is a clear answer to that question. Does anyone have any follow-up on this particular subject?
I do. So the way I look at it, Michael, when I fail, I have more chance to retry. So I can strengthen my sattvasana, one thing. Another thing, what my question is, instead of giving attention where it goes, can we attend to the attender who's taking our attention?
Attending, the attender, the one who is the attender means the one who is attending, that is ego. So that is our aim. Our aim is to attend to ourselves, not to attend to anything other than ourselves. Our attention keeps on getting under the sway of our Vishaya vasanas. Our attention keeps on going out towards other things. We need to turn our attention back to ourselves, the one to whom all those other things appear. In other words, the one who is aware of all those other things.
Yes.
Is that clear?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Michael. So there is a follow-up question on the same questioner asks. Also, one thing I notice is that the desire for enlightenment itself is creating an identity for me. Once I do inquiry on this area, I am curious what will be the motivation factor if I lose the desire for enlightenment.
When we talk about the desire for enlightenment, it depends on what our understanding of enlightenment is. True enlightenment that is, our real nature is the infinite light of pure awareness. This light of pure awareness is never hidden, but it is obscured when we rise as ego, because as ego, instead of being aware of ourselves as just I am, which is the light of awareness, we're aware of ourselves as I am this body, I am this person. So what is called enlightenment is nothing but the removal of this, of what is obstructing the ever-shining light of pure awareness. What is obstructing is our rising as ego and consequent false identification. We identify ourselves as I am this body, I am this person. So the desire for enlightenment is fundamentally different. If we understand what enlightenment is, if we've got some idea that enlightenment is something that we're going to gain, if we have a wrong understanding of enlightenment, then that desire for enlightenment is a desire for something other than ourselves, which is obviously a misdirected desire. If we understand that enlightenment is nothing but what we always actually are, then that desire for enlightenment is fundamentally different to any other desire, because it's not a desire for gaining anything. But what obstructs the light of awareness, it never completely conceals the light of awareness, but it obstructs it, makes it appear to be something other than what it actually is our rising as ego. So enlightenment is not something that we gain. Enlightenment is what remains when we give up everything, including our wrong identification. I am this body, I am this person. That dehabhimana is the root identification. Only because we identify a body as all the other identifications come into existence. I am Indian, I am European, I am American, I am Hindu, I'm Buddhist, I'm Jain, I'm a Jew, I'm Christian, I'm Muslim, I'm this, I'm that. All these identifications are rooted in the primary identification, the dehabhimana, the false identification, I am this body. The question is, I noticed that the desire for enlightenment itself is creating an identity for me. That shows the problem there is a misunderstanding. That is, if we understand what enlightenment is, it's not a new identity. It is giving up all identity. So if we identify ourselves as I am a spiritual seeker, that is another false identity. So we shouldn't. What we are investigating is I am, not I am this or I am that. So if we really have love to know and to be what we actually are, which is what I think is referred to here as desire for enlightenment, that love will not create a new identity. It will create, it'll prompt us to hold on to our own being, and thereby to shed all identity, all identifications. That it's only when we rise as ego, as I am this person, but we begin to identify with one thing or another. So if, for example, we feel I am a spiritual aspirant, who is a spiritual aspirant? It's because of our identification with this body, but we then feel I, such and such a person, am a spiritual aspirant. That any identification is a false identification. Only our real identity was very clearly and simply expressed by Bhagavan. I am I, aham aham, nan nan. That is, we are nothing other than ourself. So long as we identify with anything other than ourself, that whatever we identify with is reinforced, that is a secondary identity, which is reinforcing the primary identity, our identification, I am this body, I am this person. So if we really understand what this spiritual path is, the desire for enlightenment is not the desire for gaining anything, but the desire to give up everything. In other words, the love to surrender ourselves completely, to give up all forms of identification. So if we are identifying ourselves as I am a mumukshu, that is, again, it's a false identification. It is, we are not mumukshus, we are not spiritual aspirants, we are just I am, nothing other than I am. That alone is our true identity. Regarding what is the motivation factor, of course we need to have love to follow this path. But that love is not a love to gain something. But I, Michael, want to gain something called enlightenment. So then I wear it as a badge. I am enlightened. I am a jnani. I am self-realized. This is all a complete misunderstanding of what the spiritual path is. The spiritual path is about holding on to what we always actually are, namely our own being, and thereby shedding all other things. That is, to the extent to which we hold on to our being, all identity, everything we identify with will drop off, because we identify with things by identifying anything is grasping that thing in our awareness, in our attention. So, but when we focus all our attention on our own being, all these false identities will drop off, and finally what will remain is what we always actually are, the pure, eternally adjunct-free awareness I am. So love is absolutely essential, but that if we take it that the love to know what we actually are is a new identity, we are missing the point. We haven't really understood how to apply this in practice. We don't need to identify ourselves. I am a spiritual aspirant. I'm a mumukshu. I'm a devotee. I am this, I'm that. This is all just adding to the reinforcing the primary identification, I am this person. So our aim should be to hold on only to our own being, I am, and forget everything else. I hope that's a clear answer to that question. The very nature of ego is grasping. As Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Ulujunapadu, Urupatriundam, grasping form, it comes into being. Urupatri nikom, grasping form, it stands. Urupatri undu mika ongum, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Uruvittu urupatram, leaving form, it grasps form. So the very nature of ego is grasping. And the driving force behind grasping is desire. It's because we desire to maintain this false identity that we now have taken. I am this person, but we are constantly grasping other things. So we cannot be without, if we don't love to know and to be what we actually are, we'll love other things. Well, our love will take the form of desire for things other than ourselves. So Our aim is not to lose the desire for enlightenment, but to lose ourself in that desire, in that love, just to be as we actually are.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I've heard a story or something like where some people who come and ask Bhagavan, I only want enlightenment. I don't want anything else. Please give me enlightenment. And after the people leave, like Bhagavan used to say that if they really know what enlightenment is, they won't be asking for it, implying implying
Yeah.
that it is giving up of everything and
Yeah,
not gaining anything.
exactly. People have um, a very poor understanding of what enlightenment or jnana or moksha or whatever it is. They think it's something that is to be gained. It is not something, as Bhagavan says, we are nitya mukta, we are eternally liberated. But our natural state of eternal liberation is seemingly obscured by our rising as ego. So, and Bhagavan also used to say, if jnana were a new knowledge to be attained, it would be lost, because whatever is gained will be lost. Whatever comes has to go. So jnana is what we actually are. As he says in, for example, in verse 13 of Uludranapadu, he begins by saying, Jnanamam tane me. Oneself who is jnana alone is real. So that is what we always actually are. So we're not seeking to gain something other than what we always actually are. So we're not gaining anything. Our aim is to lose everything.
Yeah, in Maharishi's gospel, Bhagavan said, the thought of I am not enlightened itself a bottleneck for that. That's what he beautifully says.
Yeah, yes. Because any thought, I am enlightened, I'm not enlightened, both are false identification. What is true is only I am, not I am this or I am that. If we start off with an idea, I'm not enlightened, then we need to shed all ideas about ourselves. Then what will remain, that is jnana, that is enlightenment.
So simple.
Yes. So simple, but it requires all-consuming love. Though it is simple, why we haven't yet given up everything, because we still have too much desire and attachment for things other than ourselves. So we have to persevere with this practice until all our interest, all our liking for anything other than just being as we are drops off.
Thank you, Michael. The next question is from Swega. In the context of Eka Jiva Vada, the doctrine of one Jiva versus multiple Jivas, contention with respect to the mind aspect. It is said that Bhagavan sometimes referred to the concept of multiple Jivas for those unable to grasp the subtlety of Eka Jiva Vada. From the perspective of many Jivas, it appears that each person I encounter has a mind of their own, with unique experiences and intellectual knowledge stored in their mind as memory. If, as per Ekajiva Vada, there is truly only one mind, does this mean that the memories and experiences of all the individuals are stored in that single mind? If so, why am I only able to recollect my own experiences and not those of others? Shouldn't knowledge of all material things and experiences of all individuals be accessible to me if everything exists within one mind?
Okay. First, we need to understand what Ekajiva Vada is and what it is not. Ekajiva Vada means the contention that there's one jiva. Jiva means ego. Ego is the one who is experiencing all this. we never, the question begins from the perspective of many jivas. We never have the perspective of many jivas. We always have the perspective of one jiva. But in the view of this one jiva, there seem to be many other jivas. Take, for example, to understand Ekajiva Vada, we need to consider a dream. So long as we are dreaming, we seem to be a person in that dream world. And there are so many other people in that dream world. And because we identify ourselves as one person, it seems to, that when I say, because we identify, the we who identify ourselves as I am this person is ego, the dreamer. So because we identify ourselves as a person, it seems to us that every person is an ego just like us and is experiencing the world. So if you ask anyone in your dream, do you see this? They'll of course say to you, yes, of course I see it. I see just what you're seeing. So it seems to us, so long as we are dreaming, that we are one among many jivas experiencing that world. That is, in the view of ourself, the dreamer, we are one jiva among many jivas. So long as we're looking outwards, there will always seem to be a multiplicity of jivas. But when we wake up from the dream, we recognize that that entire dream world and all the people in it were just our own mental fabrication. Not only all the other people, but even the person we seem to be was a mental fabrication. We, the dreamer, alone experienced all that. As the dreamer, we would have had some memories, but we don't have access to the memories of other people. Of course not, because those other people seem to us to be other than ourselves. So even when we wake up, we only remember what we experienced in the dream. We cannot remember what others seem to be experiencing in our view. That's just getting into confusion. I mean, we're just confusing ourselves if we begin to think like that. So in this, according to Bhagavan, this present waking state is just another dream. So the one jiva is the one who is experiencing all this. In the view of this one jiva, that the one jiva takes itself to be a person. And so in the view of the one jiva, all the other people seem to be jivas, not only all the other human people, but all the other people in whatever form, whether cows or dogs or horses or cats or elephants or whatever. They all appear to be jivas just like us. They all seem to be having experiences just like us. That doesn't mean that we experience all their memories, but they just seem to each be a separate jiva with their own experiences and their own memories. That will always seem to be the case so long as we look outwards. So why did Bhagavan teach us Ekajiva Vada? He didn't teach us Ekajiva Vada to change how we behave in the world. Of course, so long as we are looking outwards, we seem to be just one person among so many billions of other people, and we have to behave accordingly. The reason Bhagavan taught us Ekajiva Vada is all this entire world, with all the multiplicity of seeming jivas, all appears in whose view? In my view. So who am I? It is to turn our attention back to ourselves, the one to whom all other things appear, but Bhagavan taught us Ekajiva Vada. He sometimes spoke explicitly about Ekajiva Vada, but maybe he didn't say so often explicitly, but it's implicit in so many of his teachings. For example, verse 26 of Ulladu Napadu, he says, if ego comes into being, everything comes into being. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. So ego there means the dreamer, the one I who is aware of all these things. So all the multiplicity of jivas come into existence only when we rise as a jiva. So all those the multiple other jivas seem to exist only in the view of the one jiva that we now seem to be. So if we want to find out the truth of all this, we need to investigate ourselves, the one to whom all this multiplicity appears. Then we know the reality of this appearance of multiplicity. Because the appearance of multiplicity appears only in the view of the one ego. Without knowing the reality of the one ego, we cannot know the reality to whom all the multiplicity appears. We cannot know the reality of the multiplicity. So the multiplicity depends for its seeming existence upon the one ego who experiences it. If that one ego turns its attention back towards itself to see who am I, it will subside and dissolve back into its source. And what will then remain is Satchit, the pure being awareness that we actually are. And then it will be clear, not that there's one jiva, but there never was any jiva at all. So Ekajiva Vada is not the ultimate truth. But so long as we are experiencing ourselves as a jiva, we should be focusing on investigating the truth of this one jiva of whom we have direct experience. And let's not worry about the other jivas. Because if all this is a dream, if we wake up, the whole dream comes to an end. So everyone's problems are solved. So the only way to solve all problems is to wake up from this dream ourselves. And for that, viewing things from the perspective of the Ekajiva Vada is a very, that will motivate us more to turn within than if we take it that there's actually a world out there with so many other beings in it. Then we'll begin thinking, oh, what can I do to solve all these problems? All these problems seem to exist because we see them. So who am I who see all these problems in the world? That should be what we are investigating. Have I explained that clearly?
Yes, Michael, thank you. I would also appreciate if you could touch upon the mind aspect. Might be I'm not quite clear. Like, how is my memory? Only do I able to sort of recollect only my memory, whereas not that of others? Like, does it even make sense?
According to Ekajiva Vada, there are no others. All the others are just. You seem to be a person, and in your view, there are many other people. And because you, as ego, take yourself to be a person, it seems to you that every other person is an ego. It will always seem like that so long as we look outwards. But actually, we only ever experience one I, one ego. So in a dream, supposing we were dreaming, you were dreaming now, and we were having this conversation, it would seem to you that the Michael you're talking to is a jiva just like you. He has his own set of memories and experiences and everything. But then if you wake up from your dream, you will understand that this Michael is just in the view of your dreaming mind, this Michael seemed to exist. Not only not only is Michael your own mental fabrication, even Svega is your own mental mental fabrication. That is, the jiva is not the person. The jiva is ego, the one who identifies a certain person as I. and in whose view, therefore, many other people also seem to exist. Is that clear now?
Yes, it is clear. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So, Michael, the memory belongs to the body. So body has to function with the memory. That makes sense. But the mind comes in between this memory and body, and then creates all this drama.
Okay. What do you mean by mind?
The imagination, the identity.
Okay. But the thing is that the word mind is used in many different senses. The body that we're talking about, the body that we take ourselves to be, is, as Bhagavan said, Uru Pancha Kosa Uru, in verse 5 of Uludunapadu. We need to understand this very clearly. When Bhagavan talks about body, he's not just talking about the physical form of the body. That's just one of the 5 sheaves. Whenever we experience a body as I, we never experience a dead body as I. It's always a living body. So the form of the body is the Annamaya kosha. The physical form of the body is the Annamaya kosha. The life that animates that Annamaya kosha is called Pranamaya kosha. And so, since it's always a living body, we always experience the Annamaya kosha and Pranamaya kosha together. We also never experience a sleeping body as I. It's always a body that seems to be awake. Even in dream, the body that we take to be I seems to be awake. So, because it seems to be awake, there's in that body, there's also a mind, an intellect, and a will functioning. The mind is called Manamaya kosha, the intellect is called Vijnanamaya kosha, the will is called Anandamaya kosha, or the Karana Sarira. That's all the vasanas. So these 5 together make up the body that we seem to be. When we use the term mind, we can be referring to the Manamaya kosha. Manamaya kosha is just the grosser functions of the mind. That is, perceptions, memories, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and so on. These are all called Manamaya kosha. Vijnanamaya kosha is subtler than the Manamaya kosha. That is the intellect, the reasoning, discriminating, discerning, judging aspect of the mind. And subtler than that is the will. So we can use the term Manamaya mind to refer just to the Manamaya kosha. We can also use it to refer to all 3 of these, to the mind, the intellect, and the will. These are collectively often referred to as mind. Mind can also be used to include the 4th antakarana, namely ego. Whereas the antakarana means these 4, manas, buddhi, chittam, and ahankaram. Manas is manamaya kosha, buddhi is vijnanamaya kosha, chittam is anandamaya kosha. But ego is not a kosha. Ego is that which identifies all these koshas as I. So these 4 together are collectively referred to as the antakarana, the inner instrument. So this inner instrument is also sometimes used, sometimes referred to as mind. So the word mind can involve the whole bundle of mind, intellect, will, and ego. Mind is, we also often talk about the mind sees the world. When we talk about the mind seeing the world, the mind that sees the world is ego, because ego is the only perceiving element of the mind, is the only element of the mind that has awareness. So Bhagavan often refers to ego as mind. In fact, in verse 24 of Ulladu, where he says, the Jada Udul na nenadu, the insentient body does not say I. Their body refers to not just the physical form of the body, all the 5 sheaths. they're jada. Then that means they don't have any awareness. So they don't. When he said they do not say, if the body does not say I, he means it's not aware of itself as I. Then in the next sentence he says, Satchit udiyadu. Satchit does not rise. So on the one hand, we've got a body which is devoid of awareness and therefore not aware of itself as I. On the other hand, we've got Satchit, which is just being. It never rises. But in between, one thing I rises as the extent of a body. The I that rises as the extent of a body, because it rises, it's not Satchit. And because it's I, it's not the body. But it conflates the two of these together, and it takes itself as I am this body. And then he goes on to say, this is Chit Jada Granti. Chit Jada Granti means the knot formed by the entanglement of Chit and Jada. What is Jada is the body. All the five sheaths are Jada. The Chit element is I am. So when we are aware I am this body, the body is Jada, I am is Chit. So this false awareness, I am this body, is called Chit Jada Granti. So he said, Chit Jada Granti, bandham, bondage. Bondage because when we identify ourselves as I am this body, that's a bondage. We have bound ourselves with this knot. Jivan, it's the jiva. Nupame, the subtle body. Here he's using the word subtle body in a different sense, because there are two senses in which the word subtle body is used. In many classifications, the pranamaya kosha, manamaya kosha, and vijnanamaya kosha are referred to as the subtle body. But here he's using the word subtle body in a different sense, because it's often said, when at the time of death, we leave this gross body and go on some other one. It is said the subtle body is what goes from one body to another. Their subtle body doesn't mean this pranamaya kosha, manamaya kosha, and vijnanamaya kosha. It means ego, as he clarifies here by saying nupame, subtle body, ahande, ego, Ichsamsaram, this samsara, the whole of samsara is nothing but this ego, manam, the mind. So the mind, the term mind is used in many different senses. It can refer to the manamaya kosha. It can refer to all the four antakaranas, the manamaya kosha, vijnanamaya kosha, anandamaya kosha, and ego, or it can refer only to ego. So it depends on the context. In verse 18 of Upadeshundya, Bhagavan says, Enangale manam, thoughts alone of the mind. So what we have to understand from that is we often use the mind as a collective name for the totality of all thoughts. So in one sense, the mind includes all thoughts. But as he goes on to say, of all, meaning of all the thoughts, the thought called I alone is the root. The thought called I means ego. So ego is the first thought. Why is it the root of all other thoughts? Because all other thoughts are objects, whereas ego is the subject. The objects exist only in the view of the subject. The objects are all jada. The only element of the mind that is endowed with awareness is ego. So all other thoughts depend upon ego. So ego is the root of all other thoughts. And then he concludes by saying that, they say, I'll get the entire verse. Enangale manam, thoughts alone of the mind. Yavinam, of all thoughts, that means, nananam ename mulamam. And then he concludes, yanam manam enal. What is called mind is only I. That is what he implies there is, though the term mind is used as a collective term for all the thoughts, what the mind essentially is only this first thought I. So we can, to explain this a bit more, the mind is a multitude of thoughts. But all those thoughts are jada, except for one thought. That is ego. Because ego has that, it is chit jada granti, it's got that chit element in it. So ego is the only element of the mind that is endowed with awareness. So all the other thoughts, all the other elements of mind exist only in the view of ego. We can say it another way. All other thoughts are objects. Ego is the subject. So the objects exist only in the view of the subject. So when we talk about mind, we need to understand from a context what is being referred to. Is it referring to the just to the grosser functions of the mind, the manamaya kosha, or is it referring to the manamaya kosha, vijnanamaya kosha, and anandamaya kosha, the mind, the intellect, and the will? It can refer to them collectively. It can also include all of these plus ego. It can also mean just ego, in whose view all these other things exist. We also use mind in another sense. All these are closely related, but they're different senses in which mind, the term mind is used. For example, in the 16th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan defines what he means by Atma-vichara. Sadakalamum manate anmavil ve tirupikutan Atma-vichara mentrupaya. That means the name Atma-vichara is only for always keeping the mind on oneself. You know, in other words, when he ends it Endrupaya, the name, that's a way of, that's giving a definition. So essentially what he's saying is there, what is the definition of Atma-vichara? Atma-vichara is sadakalamum manate atmavil vetirupadu. Keeping the mind always on oneself. There, the term mind is used in the sense of attention. We use it, the term mind in English in exactly the same way. If during a class in school, if one student is looking out, seeing the birds singing in the trees or something, the teacher will say, put your mind on the subject. You're supposed to be reading your book, put your mind on that. That means attend to it. And we also say that his mind is fully absorbed in reading his book or in watching a film or in doing his work, that their mind means attention. So when we use the term mind, we need to understand from the context the sense in which the term mind is being used. So if we want to ask questions about the mind, we need to be clear about in what sense we are using the word mind. Is that
so the question was,
yes.
Swega was asking, how can we cannot remember someone else's memory? That's what I was trying to understand.
Well, why should we? Someone else's memory, that memory is a part of the manamaya kosha. That is part of what is called, what Bhagavan refers to as body. He refers to all 5 sheaths as a body. So every body is different. If you've got a headache, for example, I can't feel your headache. I can feel sorry for you, seeing that you've got a headache when you're saying, oh, I've got such a bad headache. I naturally feel sorry for you, but I can't feel the headache you've got. Likewise, I can't, if you remember your childhood, how can I remember your childhood? Because I am identified with this body, you're identified with that body. So you remember the memories pertaining to the person you identify yourself to be. I remember the memories that pertain to the person I remember myself to be.
True.
So
Yes.
what the 5 sheaths are not what we actually are, but they're what we identify with. And every set of 5 sheaths is separate.
Makes sense. Yeah.
I can't see what you're seeing. If we're standing side by side, we may seem to be seeing the same thing. We can both see that distant mountain. But how you're seeing it and how I'm seeing it is different. I can't see through your eyes. You can't see through my eyes. So all this separation seems to be true so long as we identify ourselves as I am this body. In other words, so long as we rise as ego, there seem to be so many differences, so many distinctions, and so many different points of view. Now there are some 7 or 8 billion people in this world. People means human people. Everyone has their own perspective on everything. That's why the world is always a place of conflict, because everyone is seeing things from their own perspective. So we need to change our perspective. Drishtim jnanamayam kritva. There's some Sanskrit sloka Bhagavan sometimes used to quote. Drishtim jnanamayam kritva. I can't remember exactly what it is. Change your outlook, your perspective into that of jnana, and see the whole world as Brahman. The world seems to be full of differences and divisions and conflicts and all these things because we are seeing it from the wrong perspective. We're seeing it from the ego perspective. Ego perspective will always be imperfect. So if we see everything from the perspective of jnana, we will find everything is one. There's only Brahman, nothing other than Brahman.
Only peace. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So this is again a follow-up question from Swega. To help clarify my understanding of the distinction between mind and jiva, could you please confirm if my understanding is correct? The material objects, including our body, the earth, the universe, and so on, are all thoughts appearing in the mind of the single ego or jiva, which the real I has identified itself with. In this view, the ego, the I am this body thought, while all other material objects or thought forms perceived by the ego in that one mind.
Okay. I think partially I've answered this already, but because the term mind can be used as a synonym for jiva or ego, it can be used in other senses. So what you've written, Svega, is the material objects, including our body, the earth, the universe, and so on, are all thoughts appearing in the mind. Yes, they are all all the thoughts. That is, they're all perceptions, memories, everything is all thoughts. It's all thoughts in the sense they are mental impressions, mental phenomena. In the mind of a single jiva, when we say they appear in the mind, that means they appear in our view. So the mind there is synonymous with ego or jiva. And then you say, which the real I has identified itself with. No, the real I is Satchit, never identifies itself with anything. It is always just aware of itself as I am I, nothing other than I. What identifies itself is ego or jiva, which identifies itself with this bundle of 5 sheaths called the body, or called the person that we take ourselves to be. The real I is never touched by this at all. So ego is, as Bhagavan says in verse 24 of Ullajnaptu, what he implies there, as I said earlier, he says the jada udal nanenadu, the insentient body does not say I. That, in other words, the insentient body is not aware of itself as I. Because it's not aware of itself as I. Satchit doesn't rise. But between one thing, I, rises as the extent of a body. So the real I is Satchit. That never rises. That never identifies itself with anything. It just is as it is. What rises is this ego, which identifies itself as a body. That's why he says it rises as the extent of a body. When we rise as ego, we feel ourselves to be limited within the confines of this body. I am here, not there. I exist in this time. I didn't exist 100 years earlier, and I'm not going to exist 100 years later. I'm just in this limited time, in the limited lifetime of this body, in the limited space occupied by this body. I is limited within this. That's how it seems to us, so long as we rise as ego. And because we limit ourselves, everything else seems to be other than ourselves. If we give up this false identification, then all differences will dissolve, and ekam eva advaityam, one only without a second, alone will remain. That is what we actually are. Tattvamasi.
Thank you, Michael.
Is that clear?
Yes, I just have a follow-up question. So,
Yes.
is it right to say that ego can never arise without identifying with the body?
Yes, absolutely. That's what Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uludunaplu. Grasping form, it comes into existence. So the first form we grasp as ego is the form of a body, which we identify as I. Not that that body exists. When we read that, it could imply, it could be misunderstood that the body exists there. We rise as ego and grasp it. But it's not so, because as he says in the next verse, verse 26, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. So the body didn't exist prior to our rising as ego. So what he implies there is, as soon as we rise as ego, we project a body and identify it as I. Consider dream, for example. We never know the exact moment when a dream starts. But as soon as the dream starts, we experience ourselves as a body in that dream world. Both the dream body and the dream world are a projection. But that is, we project and identify as I, that body. Is that clear?
This makes much. This gives me a lot of clarity. Thank you. So it's more right to say that the ego rising and identifying itself with the body are sort of like simultaneous events that happen at the same time.
Absolutely,
it's not like ego.
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. It's just linking this back to the self-attentiveness question.
Yeah.
So when I'm attending to my own self, I'm essentially attending to the Satchit. Or is it right to say that am I attending to that ego which is identified with the body?
Both are correct, because what ego actually is, it's a conflation of two things. It's a conflation of the awareness I am, which is Satchit, and the adjunct, the upadi, a body. But when we're investigating ourselves, we are not investigating the body. We're not, that means the body means all the five sheaths. We're not investigating the five sheaths, because we've already understood. And in order to start this investigation, we first need to understand that these five sheaths are not I. That's a process of neti-neti. Neti-neti is simply the conceptual analysis by which we understand that what I actually, though I now seem to be this body consisting of five sheaths, this cannot be what I actually am. And in classical Advaita, there are so many prakriyas to help us to understand that. That is, we are the seer. These are things seen by us. In other words, we're the subject, they're objects. This body, this physical, this present body exists only in the waking state. It doesn't exist in sleep, in dream. So it can't be what I actually am. In dream, I experience another body as I. That cannot be what I actually am because I don't experience it now. The same mind I seem to be experiencing as I, both in waking and dream. But in sleep, I exist without being aware of the mind. So since we exist in sleep without being aware of any of the five sheaths, these five sheaths are not what we actually are. So like this, there's so many prakriyas. These things are always changing. We're ever unchanging, and so on and so forth. So we're having understood that what we actually are is not any of these five sheaths, but only the awareness I am. What we are to investigate is this awareness I am. So we can say, if we understand this clearly, what we're investigating is Sat-Chit. But it's equally true to say that we're investigating ego. Because ego is nothing but Sat-Chit seeming to be something other than what it actually is. If you, supposing you're walking along a dark path, well, not completely dark, but it's in the dim light of dusk, you're walking along a path with Bhagavan, and you see something lying on the path ahead of you. To you, it looks like a snake. If you say, oh, Bhagavan, Bhagavan, there's a snake there, we have to be careful. Bhagavan knows very well it's not a snake, it's just a rope. So he assures you, no, no, don't be afraid. It's just a rope. But he knows that merely by saying that, it's not going to remove the false perception that you are seeing it as a snake. In your eyes, it looks like a snake. So what will he say? He'll say, look at it very carefully. Many people used to ask Bhagavan, in who am I? Is I the ego or the self? Bhagavan usually replied, ego. But there's a reason he replied that. Because if that person had understood correctly, they wouldn't ask such a question. Because there aren't two I's, one ego I and one self I. There's only one I. That one I, when mixed with, when conflated with adjuncts, is called ego. When bereft of adjuncts, it is Atma-swarupa. So, if coming back to the example I was giving, if you look at the, if Bhagavan tells you, look at it very carefully, referring to what you see lying on the ground, if you ask Bhagavan, which it should I look at? Should I look at the snake or at the rope? What will he say? He'll say, look at the snake, because in your eyes it seems to be a snake. But if you look at the snake very carefully, what will you see? Oh, it's not a snake, it's just a rope. So whether we think of self-investigation as investigating ego or investigating what we actually are, it's the same thing. Because ego is nothing but what we actually are, seeming to be something other than what it actually is. Just like the snake is nothing but a rope seeming to be a snake.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
So if you read Bhagavan's works carefully, Bhagavan, for example, in verse 25 of Uludunapadu, after saying grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. Then he says, Tedinal otum pidicum. Tedinal literally means if seeking. Tedinal literally means if seeking. But what is implied there, if ego seeks itself, if ego seeks to know itself, if ego seeks to know who am I, otum pidicum, it takes flight, it runs away. There, the implication is that we're investigating ego. In the next verse, verse 26, after saying, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. He then says, therefore, investigating what this is referring to ego, is giving up everything. So there he's clearly referring to investigating ego. In verse 38 of Uludunapadu, for example, he says, if Vinay Mudal Namayin, Vile Payan Twipo. If we are a doer of action, we will have to experience resulting fruit. Then he says, Vinay Mudala, who is the doer of action? If we investigate who is the doer of action, the doership will drop off and all the three karmas will come to an end. Again, he's clearly referring to investigating ego. In verse 9, he says the dyads and triads hold on to one thing, implying ego. If one sees within the mind what that one is, they will drop off. Again, he's referring to it as investigating ego. But in other places, he very clearly is referring to investigating what we actually are. Because, for example, in verse 27 of Uludunapadu, he says, Nano diada ullanile, namaduvai ullanile. The state in which I is without rising is the state in which we are as that. And then he goes on to say, Nan udikum tanam ade nadama, without investigating the place where ego rises. The place where ego rises is our real self. But he's not talking about, it's not two different types of investigation he's talking about here. It's the same. Whether you're investigating ego or the reality of ego or the place where ego rises, it's all the same thing. It's different ways of describing the same practice.
I think there is one other verse where Bhagavan says, saying I know myself or I don't know myself ought to be ridiculed because there are no two eyes.
Exactly.
One eye cannot see another eye because there is just one eye. We should just...
That's verse 33. Ene ariain nan, ene arindain nan. I know my, I do not know myself, I have known myself. Saying thus, it's enal nahe puhul nahe puku idanam. It's a place. It's ground for ridicule. Why? Ene that means why. Tanne vidyam arka, to make oneself an object known. Irutan undo. Are there two selves? For one self to be an object known by another self. Ondrai aneva anubhuti unmeyal. Because being one is the truth, the experience of everyone. We all experience only one eye. So there aren't two eyes, one eye to know another eye, or one eye to investigate another eye. It's all, and whether you say you're investigating ego or you're investigating what you actually are, it's the same thing. Just like the snake and the rope are not two different things, ego and Atma-swarupa are not two different things. What seems to be ego is actually Atma-swarupa. What seems to be a snake is actually a rope.
Yes. Thank you, Michael.
Right. And thank you for your questions. Good questions.
The next question is from Paula. Are faith and prayer appropriate when attending to the self if all is predetermined? If not, then are we to rest in peace no matter what circumstances you may be in? Thank you, Michael.
When it is said that all is predetermined, what is predetermined is what we are given to experience in this life. That is, to understand this correctly, we need to understand the very simple principles of the law of karma as taught by Bhagavan and as taught in Vedanta generally. That is, there are what are called three karmas. Actually, of those three karmas, only one actually is strictly speaking a karma. The other two are karma pala. That's the fruit of karma. So the first karma is what is called agamya. That is the actions we do in accordance with our will. In other words, the actions we do under the sway of our vasanas. So whatever actions we do in accordance with our will, those actions are called agamya, and agamya are the actions that produce fruit. The fruit of those actions are stored in what is called sanchita, which is the second of the three karmas. And generally speaking, in every lifetime, if we exhaust one lifetime of fruit, that is, we experience one lifetime of fruit, we may accumulate 10 lifetimes worth of new fruit, because we always, generally, unless we are very much surrendered to the will of God, we generally have many more desires than we're able to fulfill in this lifetime. So we're trying to experience so many things. As a result, we're doing so many actions and accumulating so many fruit. So over countless births, we have accumulated far more fruit than we could ever experience. So the sanchita literally means a heap or pile. That is the fruits of past actions that have not yet been experienced. So for each lifetime, God selects one lifetime worth of fruit for us to experience. But God doesn't select the fruit randomly. He selects the fruit in such a way that will be most conducive to our spiritual development. So the prarabdha is the destiny, what we're allotted to experience in this lifetime. That is what is predetermined, and that is tailor-made to suit us for our spiritual development. So what we are given, whatever we are to experience in this life is already preordained. We cannot change what we are destined to experience. Bhagavan made this very clear. I'll talk about the note Bhagavan wrote to his mother. First, I'll tell the note and then I'll explain it. What he said in that note to his mother, that this is in December 1898, when Bhagavan's mother came to visit him for the first time in Tiruvannamalai. That is, they had heard some time earlier that Bhagavan had come to Tiruvannamalai, but because they were too poor to come and his mother wanted to come and see him, but they were too poor to do so. But her eldest son had just got a job, and so he was able to save up some money, and he brought his mother to see Bhagavan. And she was pleading with Bhagavan to come home. She said, if you want to live this life of a yogi, to do tapas, you can do it in the home, but don't suffer like this. Allow me at least to take care of you by coming home. Bhagavan just sat there without answering anything. But in those days, he very seldom spoke. So when Bhagavan's mother was weeping and Bhagavan was sitting there without showing any sign of being moved, someone who was among the people who were present at the time, someone felt very sorry for his mother. So he gave Bhagavan a paper and pencil and said to him, Swami, if you don't want to reply by speech, at least reply in writing to your mother. Then Bhagavan wrote this note. And what he said in that note is, avarava prarabdha prakaram adakanavan angangirandu atvipan. What that literally means is, according to the prarabdha, in accordance with the prarabdha of each one, he who is for that, being there, will cause to dance. What that means is, in accordance with the prarabdha of each person, he who is for that means God or Guru, the one who ordains the fruit of action. Angangirandu, being there, that means being in each place, implying being in the heart of each jiva. Atavipam will cause to dance. He make them act. So what that means is, in order to experience whatever we are destined to experience, according to Prarabdha, certain actions are necessary on our part. So whatever actions we need to do in order to experience those, what we are destined to experience in this lifetime, will be made to do. So, for example, just to take a very simple example, supposing it's our destiny in this lifetime to be a doctor. In order to be a doctor, we have to study, we have to pass exams, and we have to get the qualifications. Since it's our destiny to be a doctor, we will be made to we'll be driven by God to study, study hard and to pass the exams and to get the qualification. So those actions are actions we're made to do by God. However, it's important to understand that just because an action is an action we're made to do by God, that doesn't mean that it is not also an agamya. Because, for example, most people who become doctors because they want to be doctors. They may have different motives for wanting to be doctors. Some of them may have very altruistic motives. They may think, as a doctor, I can alleviate people's suffering. So it's a good, noble profession. So I want to do something where I can be of service to people. Another person may think to be a doctor is it's a socially prestigious job. So if I become an eminent surgeon or something, I'll gain social prestige. So they may do it for social prestige. Other people may think if I become a doctor, I can earn a lot of money by charging people a lot of money. So they may have different motives, but most people who study to become doctors want to become doctors. So the fact that they're driven by their own vasanas means it is an agamya. It just happens that what they want happens to coincide with what God wants, which is that they should become a doctor. So what they're made to do is what they also want to do. So they're being driven both by God, in accordance with God's will, and their own will. So it's still a gamya, because if they have no desire at all to be doctor, and they're just driven by God's will, then it's not a gamya. But that doesn't, in practice, that doesn't happen. We all our actions, to a greater or lesser extent, are driven by our desires, even though some of them are also driven by God's will. So that's the first sentence. Then the next two sentences are very, very important. What Bhagavan says is, Endrum naduvadadu, enviachikanum naduvadu. That means what will not happen, what will never happen, will not happen in spite of any amount of effort. Nadepadu, entadeseyanum niladu. What is to happen will not stop in spite of any amount of obstruction. Iduve tinnam, this is certain. So what do we have to understand from this? Whatever is not to happen is not going to happen. Whatever is not destined to happen is not going to happen. Whatever is destined to happen is not going to stop. It's going to happen. But he doesn't stop saying that. He says, whatever is never to happen will not happen in spite of any amount of effort. That enviachikanam means in spite of any amount of effort. That's a very important thing, because what he implies by that is that we can, supposing it's our destiny to to lose a lot of money in business. We can want to avoid losing a lot of money in business. We can try to avoid it. We can try actually to make, we can want and a desire to make a lot of money in business. But if it's our destiny to lose all our money in the business, however much we want it and however much we try, the business is going to fail. So by saying envishkanam, he clearly implies that though what we are destined to experience will be experienced, we have the freedom to want to experience something different and to try to experience something different. So, for example, it may not be my destiny to be a doctor. That doesn't stop me wanting to be a doctor. It doesn't stop me trying to be a doctor. But something will stop me being a doctor because I'm not destined to be a doctor. So we have freedom of action and we have freedom of, we have freedom of will and we have freedom of action. This is what Bhagavan called Ichara Svatantra and Kriya Svatantra. But we have no freedom to change what we are destined to experience. So likewise, the second sentence, he says, what is to happen will not stop in spite of any amount of obstruction. In spite of doing any amount of obstruction, it will not stop. That is, if it's meant to happen, however much we try to avoid it, it's going to happen. Iduve tinnam, that means this is certain. And then he concludes by saying, Ahalin monamai irake nandru. Therefore, being silent is good. What does he mean by being silent? Does he mean we should sit doing nothing? No, obviously not, because whatever we are meant to do in accordance with our prarabdha will be made to do, as he said in the first sentence. What he means by being silent is not rising as ego. When we rise as ego, we inevitably act under the sway of our vasanas. So we'll inevitably be doing some agamya to a greater or lesser extent. So the only way to be silent is to not rise as ego. And in order to avoid rising as ego, we need to hold on to self-attentiveness. So long as we allow ourselves to rise as ego, we'll be swayed to a greater or lesser extent by our vasanas, and therefore inevitably be doing actions. So when it is said that everything is preordained, what it means is everything that we are given to experience is preordained. It doesn't mean that we don't have freedom of will and action. Bhagavan was very, very clear about that. Bhagavan always said we have Ichara Svatantra and we have Kriya Svatantra. We have the freedom to want whatever we want, and we have the freedom to try for it, but we don't have the freedom to experience anything that we are not destined to experience, or to avoid experiencing what we are destined to experience. So what about prayer? Where does prayer come into this? Prayer can be used for different things. Most people who pray to God, they pray to God for material things. They pray for having a good life for themselves, good life for their family, to remove all difficulties and give them all the health, wealth, and whatever else they want. That is what prayer is usually used for. Such prayer is just an agamya. We are using our will to want something that in accordance with our will. That such prayers may sometimes seem to be answered, because remember that God has tailor-made the prarabdha in such a way that is most conducive to our spiritual development. So if we're at that stage in our spiritual development when we have many desires, but rather than trying to fulfill our desires by cheating and exploiting others, we think we can only fulfill our desires by the grace of God. Therefore, we go to temple, we go to church, we go to mosque, we pray, all these things, and we think God will give us a good life. So God, in such cases, he will have designed the prarabdha in such a way that many of our prayers will seem to be answered. Not all our prayers, but many of them will seem to be answered. So that gives us more faith in praying to God. So we pray to him more and more, and slowly that when we depend on God more and more, our mind is thereby purified. And the more the mind is purified, the more it's clarified. And sooner or later, we come to understand when God is providing everything that I need, he's answering my prayers and everything, how petty it is of me to ask God for this or that. He knows better than I do what is good for me. So rather than praying to God for this or that, I should just pray, your will be done. Or as Bhagavan put it in Aranachya Patikam, ninishtam enishtam, your will is my will. Imbadaku, that is happiness for me. So we begin to give up praying to God for this or that, and we pray only for the love to surrender ourselves. This is how the bhakti, bhakti marga is a gradual means by which we progress and are purified. So praying for this or that is not going to change our prarabdha. So it's a misuse of our freedom of will and action. So what should we pray for? Bhagavan has shown us in Arunachal Aksharam Malai, Navamani Malai Patikam and so on, how we should pray, what we should pray for. What we should pray for is the love to surrender ourselves. What we should pray for is the annihilation of ego, the one who rises with all these likes, dislikes, desires, and so on. So prayer is good, but we should use prayer wisely, rather than praying for things that is not going to change our destiny. Our destiny is already predetermined. God has chosen it, the best destiny for us. So asking for him to change our destiny, or to give us something that is not destined, or to remove some difficulty that is destined, is foolishness. The only thing we should do, as far as our external life is concerned, give me the strength to wholeheartedly and joyfully accept whatever you give me. If you put me in hell, let me be happy to be in hell, because it's your will. Your will is my happiness. Such should be the attitude of a true devotee. So if we use prayer to pray for the love to surrender ourselves, that prayer will definitely be fruitful, because the love to surrender ourselves has nothing to do with prarabdha. Prarabdha is only the fruit of our past actions, which is what we're given. But surrendering ourselves, investigating ourselves, having the love to investigate and surrender ourselves, these are not karmas. These are, this is born purely out of our will, and it's investigating ourselves or surrendering ourselves is not a doing, it's a giving up of doing. It's a cessation of doing. So that has nothing to do with prarabdha. So praying for the love to surrender ourselves, the love to investigate ourselves and thereby surrender ourselves completely, that is a wise prayer. And that prayer will certainly be granted. The benefit of such prayer, we are attuning our will with the will of God. Because what ultimately is it that God wants? God wants us to be happy. But he knows that he can't make us happy just by giving us the trivial pleasures of life, because these are all fleeting. So he wants to give us the eternal and infinite happiness that is our own real nature. Not really giving us, he wants us to see, but we are eternally and infinitely happy. So God's will is that we should surrender ourselves completely to him, because then only can we know ourselves as we actually are. So praying for what Bhagavan wants to give us, that is what is wise. By praying for what Bhagavan wants to give us, we are attuning our will with his will. And thereby we are surrendering ourselves to his will. Is that a clear answer to the question?
Yes. I was thinking of prayer and faith as more like objects, but I can see that by praying in favor of what God wants is profitable.
Yeah.
Does this destroy the ego, like the things we go through? Since we can't have what Sri Ramana had at 16, is the ego destroyed just like little by little through our efforts?
Well, ultimately, ego is either alive or dead, so it can't be killed little by little. But what happens by following this spiritual path? We gain purification of mind. The more we follow this spiritual path, the more we surrender ourselves, the more our mind is purified. The impurities in the mind are all the desires and attachments for things other than ourselves. So when our desires are weakened and we become more and more surrendered to the will of God, that is the purification of mind. And only when we are willing to surrender ourselves completely will ego be annihilated. God will never force the annihilation on ego. He won't kill us until we are willing to give ourselves entirely to him.
Okay.
So we need not worry, but moksha is suddenly going to fall on us one day when we're not ready for it. Bhagavan is preparing us. He is making us ready. So when we attain it, we will attain it because we want nothing else but to give ourselves wholly to him.
That's a hard answer, but I can accept that.
Yeah. Well, it's difficult for all of us to accept it, but accepting it is if we're able to accept this, not just on the surface of the mind, if we wholeheartedly accept this, that is the state of complete surrender. That is the moment when ego will be annihilated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Next question is from Patrick. My question is about the place doing devotional chanting to Bhagavan from the songs and poetry of Muruganar and Sadhu Om. I love these writings and use them for my devotional time I spend with Bhagavan every day. I try to share a certain title of Muruganas with a participant or friend who attends one of the other groups. She said that there was a subtle ignorance in these writings and that they are contrary to Bhagavan's wishes to not to be revered as Guru, let alone divine. Could you clarify how we give such extreme dualistic devotion to Bhagavan and how it sometimes seem that he, when in the body, discouraged such devotion?
I don't think Bhagavan ever discouraged devotion. In fact, Bhagavan, through his own, in Arunachal Stuti Panchakam, Bhagavan himself has taught us to pray like this. So it is, yeah, I don't understand the objection that that friend of yours had about this. That is, so long as we rise as ego, there is an appearance of duality. But by rising as ego, we limit ourselves as this finite person that we seem to be. And therefore, God, whether you call it Bhagavan or Guru or God or whatever, Arunachal, whatever, seems to be something other than ourself. Of course, they never actually other than ourselves, but because we've limited ourselves, we create that seeming separation. So in this state of seeming separation, it is appropriate to pray for the dissolution of this separation. In other words, for the dissolution of ourself as ego. If it were inappropriate, then why Bhagavan sang Aksharam Lai? Why he sang the prayers we find in Navamani Malai, in Patikam? It very, very clearly, Bhagavan has shown us the appropriateness of prayer. And these are works that came to Bhagavan spontaneously. Aksharam Lai, Patikam, Ashtakam, all of these came to Bhagavan spontaneously. At least in the case of Aksharam Lai, there was a seeming pretext because some devotees had asked Bhagavan to compose a song so that they could sing when they go begging food. But it wasn't really for that, but Bhagavan, though that may be a seeming pretext, that wasn't really why Bhagavan sang Aksharam Lai. If you read the content of Aksharam Lai, it is clear that is that Bhagavan was pouring out his heart, pouring out the love. And that is, of course, when Bhagavan sang these songs, he had already become one with Arunachala long before. That day in Madurai, when that fear of death came to him, he turned within and he merged forever into, and he what remained is only Arunachala. So, but through Bhagavan, Arunachala has taught us how we should pray. So Bhagavan expressed in Aksharam Lai and other prayer songs the yearning that is in the heart of any true devotee. And another important thing to understand about prayer, though Bhagavan has given us these prayers in words, prayer is more than just words. That is what these words are expressing is an intense longing in the heart. That longing in the heart is the real prayer. So by reading and meditating on the meaning of these prayer songs of the Bhagavan has sang, that Morgana has sung, that Sadhu Om has sang, this is a way of attuning our will with his will, attuning ourselves to want what he wants to give us.
And isn't and Michael, isn't this prayer?
Can I just finish? Anyone who thinks that praying like this is in any way contrary to Bhagavan's path has not understood Bhagavan. To understand Bhagavan fully, we need to read not only Nana, Uladunapadu, Upadeshundiya, Atma-vichara, and so on. We also need to read deeply and understand Arunachala Stuti Panchakam. Because this is all part of that bhakti and jnana are not two separate paths. They are one and the same path. Bhagavan has made that so clear, particularly, I mean, he's made it clear in so many places, but particularly in Arunachala Stuti Panchakam. Yes, sorry, Rati.
I was going to say, yes, I think the prayer in Arunachala Stuti Panchakam is that perfect love, the love that the bhakti is a surrender. But more than that, actual prayer, when you think of it, is a stillness of mind. It's actually the maunam. It's the maunam, which is, it's not really asking for anything. There's no sankalpa in prayer. The real true prayer is actually the stillness of being, right? Of stillness of mind.
Yes and no. I mean, we definitely in Aksharam Lai, Bhagavan is asking for things. There's definitely an asking there, but that asking is an expression of the love.
Yes.
The ultimate prayer is to give ourselves wholly to God. In Maharshi's Gospel, in some place, Bhagavan, I can't remember what Bhagavan had said, but someone asked, if we surrender ourselves, then is no prayer necessary? Bhagavan said, surrender itself is a mighty prayer. That's what's recorded there. I think he might have well have said, surrender is the mightiest prayer of all. Because
Yeah, I think
all
what I
prayer
meant,
is a
yeah.
movement towards surrender. When we surrender ourselves, that is the ultimate prayer.
Yeah, I think what I meant here is surrender of our ego, a complete surrender of self-surrender.
That is the ultimate prayer.
Yes, yes.
I think Patrick has his hand up. Patrick, do you have a follow-up question?
No,
Please
I
go.
just wanted to say that I pretty much what Michael has said confirms what I was feeling and thinking. So I just want to say thank you.
Okay, well,
And Michael, more than anybody else, you have explained this to us so well, having followed you now for I think about close to 6 years now, and listening to every talk I can. I mean, this is so reiterated by you over and over again, that turning within, the Atma Samarpana is the self-surrender, which is also, which is the Atma-vichara, and Atma Samarpana is the same thing, really. And the Arunachala Stuti Panchakam is in a way easier to accept for many of us, because we all start out dualistically. So, dualistic worship is where we all begin. So, in a sense, learning to go this route, where actually both help. The times when going back and questioning your thought, going back in self-inquiry is very, very beneficial, and it works a lot. But other times, just completely, just merging completely with the divine, and letting him take charge of us.
yeah.
That is with his grace. I mean, that's everything.
Yeah. Well, I haven't said anything. I'm just pointing out what Bhagavan has said. And Bhagavan has made it, I mean, Bhagavan said so often, Bhakti is the mother of jnana. Which, if we think about it, it's so obviously true. Because jnana is the state of complete self-surrender. Only when we give up our false identification, I am this body, what remains is jnana. So jnana and self-surrender are synonymous. And we are not going to surrender ourselves unless we have all-consuming love to surrender ourselves. So without bhakti, there cannot be jnana. In fact, bhakti and jnana are one and the same thing ultimately.
And where Bhagwan's pleading, in Makshramanamalai and Aruna, and Padikam and all these prayers, is the pleading is what tells us that this is what we really need to be. This is what we need to be doing.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah. Bhagavan is very clearly showing us what we should be aspiring for, what we should be longing for, where we should be channeling our love.
Yeah. Namo Ramanaya.
Namo Ramanaya.